Okay, this is part 2 to intro of my story, and the focus of this video is how I met my twin. So, I had gone to a psychic. I'd seen a number of psychics in the months leading up to this particular reading, and this psychic introduced me to the chakra system. So I was 24. It was 1999. I believe it was either in December or January. It was in January. And I had gone there, wanting some help healing from heartbreak to do with someone who really introduced me to what it feels like to be to fatefully meeting somebody who comes into your life for a reason, enacts huge change on you, your life, causes you to question everything, things turn upside down. And so that had recently happened to me, and we had parted ways. And though I was mourning the breakup, I was prepared for what came next and realizing I had to let go of the old in order to invite the new. So anyway, I went to this reading, and he did a chakra clearing on me, which I remember feeling was incredibly effective. Walked me through all different chakras, visualizing the colors. And at the end of the healing session, he asked me if I was in a relationship, and I said no. And he seemed very concerned and said that this relationship really should have started, that I should be in this relationship. And he went on to describe this person, and the words he used were someone with the same schooling as myself, someone who was blonde, who had blue eyes, and that this would be a very important relationship for me. So I left there thinking, well, I wonder who this could be. Thinking about all the different men I knew who had blonde hair, blue eyes, and in terms of the same schooling, I had a university degree, a bachelor degree, so I was looking at the different men in my life who possibly could fill this description. And though I could, kind of consider a few people who fit that description, there didn't seem to be anything really there, like enough to kind of act on that that this was this huge relationship or hugely important relationship that was about to happen. Anyway, about a month later, or less than a month, I received a call from a friend who had been snowboarding and was just raving about it, how amazing the snow was, how ecstatic it made him feel. And it occurred to me that I hadn't been snowboarding yet that winter season, and in the past I'd been a really, really passionate snowboarder, but this particular winter I'd been caught up in my Kundalini awakening, which is going to be something I talk about in other videos. Though his call kind of grounded me and gave me the inspiration and the feeling that I needed to get out there. I needed to get out into the mountains and in the snow and feel that freedom and the wilderness, that excitement and adventure, and kind of get a break from all of the heavy spiritual kind of processing I'd been doing and soul searching. So I called up my brother, and it turned out that he was heading out to a particular mountain with some friends, and invited me to go along with them. So there at the base of the mountain, they were preparing to hike up just to avoid the cost of the ticket to get to the first lift. And I was about to go with them when a voice inside me said, "Buy a ticket." And I turned to the group I was with and said, "I have to buy a ticket." And they all kind of gave me some grief, thought I was being wimpy, come on, it's not that much of a hike. And I could not listen to this voice. It literally was a voice in my head, and this very, very strong sense of intuition that there was just no option. And I had been practicing working on my intuition and knew what it was. Had gotten to that point in my evolution, and I just said goodbye to the group, and that we made plans to meet up for lunch. So I went and bought a ticket, got up on the mountain, was snowboarding on my own, and it really just kind of gave me some time to kind of process the previous breakup I'd been through. And I remember throwing it out there to the universe while sitting on a chairlift, saying, you know what, I let this go, and I invite in the new. I'm ready for a different experience. And, being up there in communion with nature, it really felt powerful. Anyway, I went to meet the group at lunch, and lo and behold, the resort we were at, it actually has two mountains that share the same base, and I ended up on a different mountain than everybody else. No one came to meet me for lunch, and because this was 1998 and long before cell phones, there was no way to communicate to the group, so I was actually quite kind of upset and thought, great, here I am, my day out back snowboarding, I'm having to snowboard by myself. I'll end up meeting them at the car at the end of the day. So I proceeded to spend okay, here I go, spend the afternoon on my own. And I went to this one area of the mountain, and I waited in the lineup, in the singles lineup, and as I kind of skated or slid on my snowboard up to the chairlift, I joined two men that were in the actual lineup, and the three of us sat down on the chair. And the first thing that struck me is the way I was standing on my snowboard. I was left foot forward and he was right foot forward, so immediately we were facing each other. I was sitting on his left. And there was an instant kind of acknowledgement of this person and a sense like, oh, look at this, we're facing each other. And anyway, as soon as we sat down, he turned to me and began chatting. And what I can remember is that our conversation just kind of had a life of its own. And I remember looking over at his friend who was, I could sense he was kind of peeved that the two of us were just chatting up a storm. And anyway, we got to it's a wintry day, so we're all covered up in hats and goggles and whatnot. And we get to the top of the chairlift, and this guy invites me to join them for some snowboarding. And I thought, well, why not? I'm by myself. So, his friend went first. This guy went second. I followed, and we ended up in this area in the trees, and his friend kind of took off. I can't remember how it worked out, but there we were, kind of in and amongst the trees, him below the mountain, me above, and us facing each other. And he let me know his friend wanted to go and wanted to leave that section of the mountain, and I was very happy to stay, so I said okay, and he then took off his goggles and hat and looked up at me, and he had blonde hair, and I couldn't tell from the distance what color his eyes were, but I just had this sense like, oh my God, is this, like, it just felt like I recognized him as, like, even more. And he asked if it was okay if he was to call me, and I said sure, and I can't remember how he got my number. We didn't have cell phones, so he didn't take it down in his phone, but maybe he memorized it. And then he kind of skated off, and I was a little bit in shock just because of how, I guess now I would maybe call it soul shock, of how the encounter kind of left me feeling very surprised and a little shaken and not nervous, but just kind of, a little soul shock. Like, what was that all about? And as I met up with my friends at the end of the day at the car, I really got the feeling like that was the reason why I ended up going off on my own. Like, the whole point of the day was for me to line up with meeting this person. And so I kind of told the story to my friends as we drove back home. But Anyway, so a few days went by, and I think I told a few friends about this encounter, and then I got a phone call one night, and it was him. And we started chatting, and he was asking me about my background and where I grew up and what schools I went to, and like a lot of questions. And again, we just had this kind of rapport back and forth. It felt really natural. And then he invited me for dinner, which I agreed to. So we're sitting at a restaurant, and he definitely had blonde hair and blue eyes. And then he kind of drops this bombshell that we had gone, based on everything I had told him, he surprised me with the fact that we had gone to the same elementary school and high school. And he just thought it was hilarious. And my soul shock went from, 5% to 5,000,000%. I remember just sitting there looking at him going, oh my God. And the conversation that went on was all about how we both felt a mission to heal the planet, and he had all these grandiose plans, and I had these very similar, not plans, but feelings, and had my own ideas, and it was a really out there conversation. And so, I think that is all that happened that night. And then, our interaction from there on in was kind of sporadic. He would show up at my place after a night out with friends, and there were several attempts to kind of sexualize the relationship, but I just remember feeling absolutely no interest in sexual encounter. There was just this desire and ongoing need to talk and to find out more about what was in his head, and the way he strung his words together were so beautiful. And I was, throughout my Kundalini awakening, I had also awakened my creative writing side. So I was doing a lot of writing, and I was just completely taken with him. And, we, like I said, we would make plans to meet up, and we would also, he kind of surprised me at work once. And as this kind of evolved, I just got more and more intense about it. My feeling beyond the shadow of a doubt was that this is the person the psychic had predicted would come into my life, or who I was meant to be with. And I had been doing some reading throughout my Kundalini awakening about soulmates. At the time, twin flames, I may have come across. Sorry, I had to stop the recording. My dog got tangled up in her leash, and I just revisited what I've recorded so far. And one important point to bring up is that the reason why the two of us didn't recognize each other is that he had been 3 years ahead, and the schools we attended were pretty sizable schools, and also I had gone elsewhere for my grade 8 year. So in fact, we were only at high school together for 1 year, and I don't ever remember meeting him. But it turns out that we had connections in that my French tutor was a good friend of his mother's, and that his family dog and my best friend's family dog in elementary school had been from the same litter. So there were these, things that lined up to kind of even deepen our connection. So like I was saying, the relationship never really took on kind of a boyfriend-girlfriend type tone. It was more after the initial connection and the adventures we would have, we'd meet up and go on these big drives and talk, and, had another day snowboarding together, phone calls, that type of thing. But like I said, I quickly became intense, and that really caused him to kind of go, whoa. I think he thought I was this interesting little creature, but he was, at the time, he really was, I would say, a little bit more, he was kind of out there, just as I was out there, but being a guy, he wasn't wearing his emotions on his sleeve. And so as the twin flame connection does, it, issues, at least I was carrying, began to creep in, and one of those was like an intense neediness, and a desire, a neediness, an urgency to make this connection, to kind of fill whatever void I was carrying in me. And that caused him to just, he realized what I wanted out of the relationship. He wasn't prepared to go there with me, and he, in his own way, very gently let me down, almost like an older brother to a younger sister type, very being, like, I guess, being brotherly about it. And so I went away for work for a few months, and all I could do was think about him. And when I came back, I had devised this plan that I would invite him to do this road trip with me, just to, kind of create the opportunity for us to spend more time. And I knew he was always up for an adventure, and I thought maybe my plan would work. But, when I went to propose it to him, I believe he was kind of half considering it. And then what happened was, I just, like, the intensity of the feeling was too much. And I ended up writing him I kind of wrote out this story with these characters that were him and I went to his house to give it to him, and keep in mind I'd been away for a couple months, and he didn't want me at the home because his new girlfriend was inside, and I freaked. And our last kind of conversation from that kind of timeline of our acquaintanceship was him telling me, I was considering doing this road trip with you, obviously platonically, but, my acting out and my reactions and my intensity and quote unquote craziness were just too much, and he didn't want to have anything to do with me again. So thus started my separation phase. So I think that's enough for now. I want to keep these videos pretty quick. But the next one, I'll talk about how the synchronicities and the intensity of this connection really basically made me feel absolutely crazy, and I literally ended up in a psychiatric unit as a result. So I'll talk about that a bit more, and I guess I'm sharing this story because for anyone who's going through any of this, I've been there. I've been to the basement and back, and I've felt the suicidal thoughts as a result of this connection. I have been told I was crazy by not only this person, but my entire family, my friends, his entire family and friends, although they never had the opportunity to tell me. I'm sure if given the opportunity, they would have told me that. So, quote unquote, crazy girl, that was me. And so if you're in that position, crazy girl or crazy boy, take heart. There is a light at the end of the tunnel, and that's what I'll get into. So thanks for listening. Hope this is helping people, and I'll be back with another video pretty soon.